Welcome to the Power of One. Today, I am so excited because I'm going to be speaking to my mentor, Dr. Stephanie Mayweather. Today, we're going to talk about new beginnings. We're going to talk about some things that may have occurred in our lives that we may not have been proud of or that set us back a little bit. But guess what? We're back bigger, better, and stronger. So do not judge. I want you to sit back and listen, smile, and get an understanding of some things that may have occurred in our lives. We're going to give you a little bit of clarity. Welcome to the show, my mentor. Hey, Steph.
Hi, Melanie. And thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. So we've been in the victim services world for a little while together. You much longer than I have. Tell the viewers a little bit about what you've done in the victim services world in Philadelphia.
Oh my God, I've done so much. I think I've been in the victim services world for about 22 years.
Okay.
However, I was the executive director of East Division Crime Victim Services for 17 years, straight 17 years. And I was, very excited about the work that the work that we've done, a lot of the accomplishments that we have, a lot of the accomplishments that we've made while in victim services. And I say we, because as the executive director with the staff, we are a team. The executive director did not do this alone. My management style brought in ideas and creativities and thoughts from my staff, and they were excellent at it. So that's why I say we. We accomplished we were one of the premier agencies to get the crime victims compensation claim form in Spanish, so that those who speak Spanish only and who were victims of violent crimes could understand what they were signing on for, what they were signing, exactly what crime victims compensation was, and what they would be compensated for, and how that works. I'm very excited about all of the partnerships that I made and was a part of while at Victim Services. And as you know, one of the partnerships was with Northwest Victim Services and North Central Victim Services, along with Temple University Hospital, creating that
North Philadelphia initiative.
yeah, the North Philadelphia initiative, making sure that victims of specifically gunshot victims receive the appropriate services and got the information that they need. So there were so many things. I could be here all night talking about the accomplishments of East Division Crime Victim Services, as well as victim services in Philadelphia as a movement, because I always say it's a victim services movement.
And I want to give a shout out to who was your right hand, which is Celeste. And I love Celeste to this day. She was awesome.
Celestine Gardner was the absolute best victim advocate, court advocate. Oh, she could do it all. And she was very caring, and she was dedicated to victim services, and she was dedicated to making sure that victims were aware that services was out there for them to help them through this traumatic experience. So I mean, you can't beat Celestine Gardner.
I know, that's right. She's awesome. So let's go and have the very tender conversation for a little bit. 2016, your life changed forever, correct?
Absolutely.
Tell viewers a little bit about that.
2016, well, actually it started in 2015. An investigation started. For what reason? To this day, none of this is clear to myself or even to the several attorneys that I had. I was accused of First, I was accused of not being in the office, and then that went away. And then I was accused of stealing a certain amount of money from the organization. And that it was stated that that money was allocated for our Spanish speaking advocates, which anyone who knows anything about East Division Victim Services, the East Division Victim Services always had a Spanish speaking person on staff. There may have been a gap where one person left and we had to, we were interviewing for the next person to start. That was the only time that we didn't have one, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, but it wasn't anything that was ongoing. So this accusation occurred, which led to the closing of the organization, us losing our funding. And then after that, 6 months after the closing of the organization, I get a call that I was going to be arrested for stealing from the organization. So I said, okay, I'm going to fight this head on, because I know that I've done nothing wrong with the funds of the organization. The story continued to change, the amount of money, the reason why this occurred, who did what, who shot John. It just continued to change. Never, to this day, never anything really concrete. The appropriate people were never interviewed. It was the strangest thing ever. But I can say this without a shadow of a doubt, that, and I borrow this from another victim advocate who was in the same position. I borrow this. I am human. I make mistakes, but I do not want there to be a shred of doubt about my integrity. I am not guilty of what I was accused of. There's a false narrative. Melany, people, they can destroy your image. They can destroy your personality. Melany, they can create a false narrative about you. But what they cannot change, they can never change the good that I've done for victims of violent crimes in East Division, the East Division section of Philadelphia, which is the 24th, 25th, and 26th police districts.
Dr. Mayweather, how did that change your life? I mean, I was floored when I turned on the news and I saw you on the news. Did this affect you getting a job? Did you ever do time? Was there ever a conviction?
No time, no conviction. I was told that it came down to me having a cell phone, and that the one of the funders does not pay for a cell phone. We knew that not to be true. We know that the cell phone was on the budget, and we know that some of the funders, they do pay for you to have a cell phone. And the people that accused me of having this cell phone were the same people that were always constantly calling me on the cell phone to reach me to do things for the organization or help them with their organization. So they stated that the bill was $10,000. So I had to weigh my odds. Is this a battle that I want to fight, knowing that I did nothing wrong and that the odds were stacked against me because it was people in higher positions that were really doing this to me? So I thought about it, got some advice, paid the $10,000. Basically that was it. It went away. It went away as weird as it came up. It was
so it has been expunged. I mean, there's nothing there.
Right. It was expunged, Melany, within a month. Never heard of anything done so quickly. It was the only thing that exists about this is the newspaper articles.
And which, if you Google your name, they just pop up.
Right. And again, please do not believe what you read. Do not believe what you read. As I was reading it, I'm like, who are you talking about? Is this me? Because when you're in the middle of this, you're like, you start to question yourself. Like, wait a
Mhm.
minute, where did I go wrong? Did I trust the wrong people? I know I was doing the right things. I know I was doing right by victims. Where did I go wrong? And you constantly go back in your head and you try to figure out what's what and who's who. And your narrative about the incident changes over time as well, because you're like, well, no, this is what happened. No, this is what happened. This is who did this. This is who did. And in the long run, none of it matters,
Mm,
because the target was you. The
mm,
target was you. And it was almost like watching a train wreck that I couldn't stop.
mm, mm. Okay. So here we are in 2023. What are
2020.
you doing now? Do you still help victims of crime?
I'm always getting phone calls from other agencies, from other victims, because victims always had my cell phone number, and they could always call me. So they're always calling, asking questions. And I'm not saying that I get 5 calls a week. I mean, maybe once every few months I'll get a phone call. So I'm still always helping people. Right now, I am working as a teacher.
Okay.
Yeah, I am a teacher in the school system here. I was working as a sixth grade math teacher, and
Okay.
currently I'm working with kids with special needs.
Oh, that's awesome. So what are your plans for the future? Is it your goal to get back in victim services in Philadelphia?
Yeah, working as a teacher is rewarding and it's wonderful, but it's not my calling. My
Mm,
calling is the field of social justice. I love working with victims. I love helping people who have adversities in their lives. And I can say that I really understand. I've had so many adversities in my life. I came to victim services because my uncle was murdered, and
mm,
families of murder victims helped our family tremendously. And watching the advocates work in the courtroom, I said to myself, that is something that I could do. And
mm.
that is how I got into victim services. Little known fact is that I was a court advocate for Episcopal Community Services. And,
Okay.
and the agency at that time was East Division Victim Services.
Mm,
And
okay.
over time, the agency that closed because Episcopal Community Services, while they were in East Division, they were not really part of the community. So I think 10 years later, came back as the executive director of the organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have any children?
I do. I have one son. My son is now 24 years old. He
Okay.
yeah, he also was majoring in criminal justice at one time.
Okay.
And so he's doing great. He's doing great.
How did it affect him? Because I'm pretty sure he saw his mom on the news. How did it affect him and how's he doing today?
Okay. When it occurred, he was like in his early teens, and my family, who was a great support to me, we rallied around him and tried to keep as much of this away from him as possible. However, it was in the newspapers. I mean, it was picked up by at least 7, 8 different newspapers, and to this day, we don't understand why that story was that important across the state and in other states.
Mhm.
So again, we did much as we could to try to shield him, but he did have a hard time with his school. And I don't, he went to a private school, and I don't think that they appreciated that one of their students' mother was on the cover of the newspaper, being arrested for stealing from a nonprofit organization. So the very next year, he was not invited back to his school, and we
Mhm.
surmised that is why. Um, he did have a very difficult time with this, as well as my family and a lot of my friends. They
Mm,
couldn't they
I'm
couldn't
sure.
believe the false narrative, because that is not what was displayed, was not the person that I am.
I'm
I'm
sure.
a
So
giver. I'm not a taker.
and I can say that that is so true. I've always reached out to you. I still reach out to you. You're like my mentor. I mean, one of the smartest women that I know for sure.
Well,
So
thank
I
you,
want to
Mel. You
ask
know I feel
you,
the same way about you. You know I
thank you.
You're so smart, so smart.
I want to ask you this question, and Being as though you've been in victim services in Philly for so long, gun violence is really not new to Philly. Some people may think, these numbers are alarming. Don't get me wrong, one homicide is too much for any city wherever you live. What's the change that you've seen over the years? Because, there was one time when females and children were off limits.
Mhm.
That's no more. Seems like there's no regard for human life. And all of the 20 something years that you've been in victim services, what is the changes that you've seen in gun violence? And the $1 million question is, and I don't know how to answer this question, I'll be honest. How do we stop gun violence in the city of Philadelphia?
I don't know the answer to stopping gun violence. I don't know, but I can tell you that the violence and the types of violence have escalated over the years. The violence, it's more vicious than it has ever been before, much more vicious. And it was a time where you really didn't see women and children being so violently attacked, or you didn't see women and children being killed. You didn't see women and children being victims as well as defendants. You didn't see that. Now you see it so much. It was a time when children and women were really like they were really off guard. Like you just didn't touch women, you didn't touch children. But you see so much violence on television. You see so much violence and so much violence in the music that kids listen to, as well as adults listen to this music. And it seems like it's acceptable. It's the movies. They're increasingly violent. The violence is unbelievable. It's more than just shootings. It's the cutting. It's the stabbings. It's everything that the world does not need right now. The wars. Everything that has to do with violence seems to be acceptable. It's kind of cool when it really isn't, because it's affecting people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So true.
And
So true.
one person being murdered, it affects the family, it affects the community, it affects everything that person has been involved in. Everything. And it's so many if one person is murdered, 20 people could be affected by it.
Mm.
And now people are being triggered by watching this violence and hearing this violence and listening about this violence. I don't know what the answer is to stopping it. I don't know.
Talk a little bit about what you think about untreated trauma. So you have this child who was probably brought up in a household that has watched domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Figure a child in a community that has seen someone get shot and killed. So at one time, when I was at Northwest Victim Services, I would go into the schools and speak to the students. And I would ask the students to raise their hand if you were affected by gun violence, and more than half of those children in there were raising their hands. So it didn't necessarily have to be something going on in their household. How does that untreated trauma affect a child, and then someone growing up to being an adult and having that untreated trauma?
Melany, working as a teacher in the school district, we see untreated trauma all the time. We see it in their grades. We see it in their behavior. We see it in the language. And it absolutely scares us, because we think that if that person doesn't get treated or doesn't get some sort of treatment, then that victim could easily be tomorrow's defendant. It's so much anger. It's a lot of internalized anger. And it's like an exhaust pipe. It's going to burst. We have to do something about that untreated trauma, because that person will walk around hurt forever. Hurt people. We know that.
Sure. That's true.
And that's my fear. That is one of my fears, especially with a lot of my students. They have this untreated trauma, and we're talking about these triggers. The music is a trigger. The movies are a trigger. Those video games are a trigger. Listening to people just speak violence. And in our schools, we see it all the time. The language is so violent and the body language is so violent. And guess what? It's so acceptable. And that we should not accept that. We have to stop accepting things that are not good for us and accepting things that are not good for our children. We must step in and we must take a lead and say, no more violence. No more violence.
Yeah. It is like so alarming. And the social media is just it is alarming. Social media is not all bad. Some young people are using the social media and they can have a beef on social media and somebody can get killed
Yes.
over what's said on social media.
And the thing about social media is once it's out there, it's hard to take it. And our youth don't understand that because a lot of our youth only see the here and now. They don't see the future, that this is going to affect my future. They don't see that. They can't see that once you put it out there, you cannot pull it back. And I'm sure it has to be a way to pull it back. I'm positive. We just don't know it, but there has to be a way to pull that stuff back out there. But social media has a large and I mean a huge stake in the violence and what's going on in the world today.
Yes, that is so true.
In some cases, social media can be the cause of it. And if it's the cause of it, then why can't it just help stop it?
That's true. That's true. Now, when you were in victim services, did you do anything with human trafficking?
I can think of one victim that we had, one young lady. She was actually about 14 or 15, and she was a victim of human trafficking. What we did for her was we hooked her, I'm sorry, I don't want to say hooked her up. We linked her up with specific services for people who were victims of trafficking. We hooked her up we linked her with, first of all, the Department of Human Services because she was so young. We spoke with her mother, and we were able to get the entire family into counseling because, again, this young lady being trafficked, that affected not only her, but it affected her mother, and it affected the way that her family looked at her and thought about her. And that is one of the things that she did internalize, and she really needed to get counseling about that.
Okay. So, Dr. Mayweather, it is your passion to get back into victim services and going back to social media. What's put out there can actually damage you. So there are some articles out there that have damaged you and hindered you from getting back into the victim services world. Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on social media?
No, I'm not. I was never at any point a large social media person, only because I see working in victim services, I did see the damage that is done to people, but I also see the good in it. It was just something, it was a personal choice of mine, just not to be out there on social media. I really didn't have a whole lot to say about things. So that's another reason that I wasn't interested in being a part of social media. Though I read everything that's out there. I have read, I'm not on any site, but I'm reading Twitter, I'm reading Facebook, I'm reading all of Instagrams. I'm constantly in the know because anybody who knows me knows that I am an information junkie.
Yes, that's true.
You
That's
know,
true.
my motto is to know a little bit about a lot, but no, I'm not.
Okay. So two things. One, if someone is watching this show and they say, I really want to help this young lady and I want to help her get a clean slate, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, you can always email me at smywthr@aol.com, and you can always call me or text me. I am at 856-558 4866. Text me, call me, email me. We can have a conversation about it. We can
Okay.
definitely have an open and honest conversation about it, but just don't let the false narrative deter you. Again, I
Okay.
am not who I was portrayed to be.
Okay. So we need to help Stephanie get all of that negative information off social media. And if you are looking for a dynamic executive director to run your victim based agency, trust me, Stephanie Mayweather is who you want. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Melanie. I always enjoy talking to you. It is always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you so much for joining us today. I'm going to ask you to never judge. Sit down and speak with someone and find out what their story is. And you will find out something new and something interesting. But guess what? Restorative justice at its best is what helps communities heal. And we can love on one another and we can help one another. Thank you so much for joining me today. Peace and love.